The first thing I noticed that morning was the smell of burned coffee. I had just come in through the main entrance with a small rolling suitcase, still wearing the cream travel suit I'd left Chicago in the night before. The lobby was cool from the air conditioning. The floor had been polished early, and I could hear that soft rubber wheel sound from carts moving across the marble. Somewhere near admitting, a printer kept spitting out labels in short, steady bursts. I had been away for 4 weeks. When you're gone that long, even a familiar building feels slightly off. Not wrong, exactly. Just different in a way you can't name right away. I stood near a column for a minute, one hand on my suitcase handle, taking in the lobby the way any visitor would. Families were speaking quietly. A volunteer was helping an older man sign in at the kiosk. 2 nurses crossed in front of me, walking fast, their badge reels tapping against their scrub tops. Then I heard a young woman say, "Very clearly, my husband is the CEO of this hospital, so you can move when I tell you to." I looked over. An older valet was standing near the sliding doors with his shoulders tucked in, like he was trying not to take up space. In front of him was a young woman in a fitted red dress and a short white lab coat she had clearly thrown on for effect more than function. One hand held an iced coffee. The other held a phone angled toward her face. She wasn't speaking quietly. She was upset that her car had been left in the sun. The valet kept apologizing in that careful, older way some people do when they already know the apology won't help. The girl rolled her eyes, then turned right back to her phone and smiled as if a switch had been flipped. A bright, polished smile. Not for the man in front of her. For the screen. I stayed where I was. I have learned that if you step in too early, you only interrupt the truth before it has a chance to show itself. So I watched. I listened. And I noticed one more thing. On the far side of the lobby, down on one knee beside a collapsed visitor, was Dr. Evan Mercer from cardiology, working calmly with both hands while an ER nurse brought over supplies. He didn't look up once. He was completely with the patient. In the same room, within the same few feet, one person was trying to hold a life together while another was performing herself for strangers online. That contrast told me more than any executive summary waiting upstairs. My name is Natalie Rowan. I was 34 that summer, and on paper, I was the Chief Strategy Officer of Rowan Health Partners, a private hospital group my mother built over 30 years. In practice, I carried majority voting control through the family trust, and every major decision still came across my desk whether people admitted it or not. Most of the staff did not recognize me right away, which was useful. My husband, Daniel Rowan, had been serving as system CEO for just under 3 years. He was polished and public, easy with donors, and always very sure of himself when a camera was nearby. I had spent most of our marriage covering the parts he did not understand, usually quietly, usually behind a closed door. This trip to Switzerland had been another example. I'd gone myself to finalize equipment terms because I knew he would struggle with the details and miss the risk points buried in the contracts. By the time my flight landed in Boston that morning, I was tired in the deep way that sleep does not fix. My plan had been simple. Stop by Harbor Ridge Medical Center first. See the place with fresh eyes. Go upstairs. Read the reports. Then decide what needed attention. But the building had already decided for me. The young woman near the door laughed at something on her screen, then snapped at the valet again because he had not moved fast enough. Her badge swung forward when she turned. It read, Kayla Mendez, intern. Intern. I looked at the time on the lobby clock. 9:12 a.m. work started at 8. She was late, out of dress code, using her phone in the middle of the front entrance, speaking to an employee old enough to be her grandfather as if he were disposable. And all of it was happening in plain sight. I walked over slowly. The valet looked up first. He knew me at once, and I could see it in his face. I gave him a small shake of the head before he could say my name. He understood and looked down again. Then I turned to her. "This is not the place for this," I said. I kept my voice even. Not cold, just clear. She lowered the phone a few inches and looked me over with the quick dismissive glance of someone who has not yet learned that authority rarely announces itself. "Excuse me," she said. I gestured lightly toward the lobby around us. You're speaking to staff in the front entrance during business hours while filming. If there's a problem with parking, it can be handled without this. For a second, she just stared at me. Then she smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I think you should mind your own business. Behind us, I could hear the soft rhythm of instructions near the patient on the floor. A blood pressure cuff. A cartwheel turning. Someone asking for glucose tabs. The lobby lights reflected off the marble in long pale bands. My suitcase was still by the column where I had left it. I folded my hands in front of me. Usually, that is the point when people either lower their voice or walk away. She did neither. Instead, she tipped her cup slightly in my direction, just enough for a drop of coffee to fall onto my sleeve, and said, "You have about 5 seconds to move before I call my husband." Then I waited. I looked at the drop of coffee on my sleeve first. It had already begun to spread into the fabric, a small dark mark against the cream color. I brushed it once with my thumb, more out of habit than concern, then lifted my eyes back to her. The phone in her hand was still recording. I could see my own face reflected faintly in the screen. Tired from travel. Hair pulled back. No makeup left except what had survived the flight. To her, I probably looked like somebody's older sister, or a patient's relative, or maybe a donor who had wandered in too early and expected to be noticed. That misreading was useful too. "I don't think you need to call anyone," I said. The older valet beside me kept his gaze down, but I could see how tense his hands were. He had been at Harbor Ridge since before my mother bought the property. He knew where the old pipes ran behind the walls. He knew which surgeons liked their cars up front after late shifts. He remembered the first expansion, the second, and the year the north garage flooded. Men like that carry institutions quietly. Most people never notice. Kayla noticed none of it. She gave a short laugh, aimed at the phone more than at me. "You hear that? She's telling me what I need." Then she shifted slightly, turned her face to catch better light, and said in a bright social voice, "Good morning, everybody. I'm literally at work dealing with harassment before I've even had a chance to breathe." Her tone changed again when she looked back at me. "You should walk away." I did not. A few feet behind us, a nurse announced that the patient had a response. Someone asked for space. I glanced over just long enough to see Dr. Mercer steadying the man's shoulder as staff helped transfer him to a gurney. He still had not looked toward the commotion at the door. He was where he was needed. That was another useful detail. In any organization, culture shows itself most clearly in ordinary moments, in the spaces between meetings, in the way people speak when they think no one important is listening. On paper, Harbor Ridge had improved over the last quarter. Patient satisfaction was up. Throughput was better. Turnover had flattened. Daniel's updates had been tidy, confident, and always a little too smooth. I had read every report on the flight home, somewhere over the Atlantic, with the cabin lights dimmed and my reading lamp making a small circle over the pages. I had flagged 12 items. None of them mentioned an intern in a red dress live-streaming in the lobby. "Ma'am," the valet said softly to me, barely above a whisper, "please don't bother with this. I can move the car." I turned to him and said, just as softly, "You're not the problem." He nodded once. His eyes looked tired. Kayla caught that exchange and stepped closer. Not enough to touch me. Enough to force the situation into a tighter frame for her audience. Her perfume was sweet and heavy, something floral laid over the sharper smell of coffee and hospital disinfectant. "I knew it," she said. "You're one of those people." I asked, "What people?" "The ones who come in here acting important because they know somebody." She lifted her chin. "The difference is I actually do." I let that sit there for a moment. Then I said, "Your badge says intern." That landed. Only slightly, but enough. Her expression shifted. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It means," I said, "you're here to learn." She folded one arm across herself, still clutching the coffee with the other hand. "I don't need a lecture from you." "No," I said. "What you need is to put your phone away, apologize to him, and start your day over before this gets bigger than it already is." For the first time, there was a little stillness around us. Not silence exactly. The lobby still moved. The elevators chimed. A volunteer rolled by with a cart of folded blankets. Somebody at reception was asking for an insurance card, but the emotional center of the room had shifted. A few people were watching openly now. 2 front desk staff had gone very quiet. A transporter standing with an empty wheelchair had paused near the wall. No one was pretending not to notice anymore. Kayla noticed that too, and people like her never like losing an audience. Her smile hardened. "You know what?" she said. "I was trying to be nice." Then, with the kind of casual precision that tells you it is not an accident, she bumped her cup forward and tipped the rest of the iced coffee down the front of my suit. It happened fast and slowly at the same time. The liquid hit my shoulder, ran across my jacket, and soaked through the front panel before dripping onto the floor. Cold first, then sticky. I could smell the burnt espresso and sweet cream in it. One stream ran down to my wrist and into my palm. The lobby went still in the way public spaces do when something crosses from rude into deliberate. Kayla jumped back half a step and put on a face of immediate innocence. "Oh my God," she said. "Why would you walk into me?" She looked straight into her phone and widened her eyes. "Did you all see that?" The valet made a sound under his breath, something between disbelief and exhaustion. A woman near the entrance said, "No, that's not what happened," but she did not say it loudly. Kayla's voice rose just enough to gather sympathy without sounding uncontrolled. "This is unbelievable. I'm being threatened at work, and now she's trying to start something physical." I took a handkerchief from my bag and pressed it once to my sleeve. The fabric was ruined. I knew that already. It had belonged to my mother. She'd given it to me after my first board vote, when I was too young and too tense and trying not to show either one. I folded the handkerchief carefully. Then I looked at Kayla and said, "You should stop recording." The confidence in her face returned at once. "Or what? Or this becomes a formal incident." She laughed again. "Do you even hear yourself?" By then, Dr. Mercer had crossed the lobby. He came over without rushing. One of the things I had always respected about Evan was that he never added his own emotion to a crisis. He simply entered it and reduced the temperature. Even now, after what must have been 20 straight minutes of direct patient care, his voice was calm. "What happened here?" he asked. Kayla answered before anyone else could. "She assaulted me," she said, pointing at me with the phone. "And now she's threatening me because she thinks she owns the place." Evan did not look at her first. He looked at me. His eyes moved once over the coffee on my jacket, then to my face. There was recognition there and concern, but he said neither out loud. That was another reason I trusted him. He knew when to keep a room stable. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said. Then he turned to Kayla. "Put your phone away." She blinked at him. "Excuse me?" "This is a hospital," he said. "You are in the front lobby, on duty, with your badge visible, recording staff and visitors without permission. Put your phone away now." She crossed her arms. "You don't get to tell me what to do." There was no change in his expression. "I do, actually. And even if I didn't, policy does." For the first time, I saw uncertainty touch her face. Not much, just a flicker. Then she reached for the strongest thing she had. "My husband is Daniel Rowan," she said. "So unless you want a problem, I suggest you back off." That was the moment the room changed for me. Not because I was surprised. By then, I wasn't. Too many things had already aligned too neatly. The lateness, the confidence, the dress code violation, the phone, the way she treated the valet like a personal servant. People only move through institutions that casually when someone higher up has taught them they can. Still, hearing my husband's name spoken in that tone, like a key she had used many times before, settled something in me. Not anger. Order. I set my handbag down on the reception counter beside us, opened the front pocket, took out my phone, unlocked it. Then I did what I always do when emotion stops being useful. I went to process. Step 1, confirm what is being claimed. Step 2, bring the right witness into the room. Step 3, let the facts arrive before anyone has time to rearrange them. I put the phone face down for a moment and looked at Kayla. "You're saying Daniel Rowan is your husband?" She lifted her chin. "Yes." "Say it again." She frowned, but pride carried her through. "My husband is the CEO of this hospital." Evan was very still beside me. The older valet had gotten pale. I picked up my phone and opened Daniel's contact. Then I waited one more second before I pressed call. Daniel answered on the fourth ring. His voice came through low and distracted, the way it did when he wanted to sound important without openly saying he was busy. "Natalie," he said, "I'm in the middle of something." I switched the call to speaker and set the phone down on the reception counter between us. The sound carried farther than I expected. Not loud enough to make a scene on its own, but enough that everyone nearest us could hear clearly. The front desk staff stopped typing. The transporter with the empty wheelchair shifted back against the wall. Kayla's face changed just slightly when she recognized his voice, though she tried not to show it. I kept my hand resting beside the phone. "I'm in the main lobby," I said. "I need you to come downstairs." There was a pause. "Now?" he asked. "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "I can't write this second," he said. "I'm with the state financing group and the bond council. Give me 20 minutes. I looked at the coffee dripping slowly from the hem of my jacket onto the polished floor. "No," I said. "You need to come now." His tone tightened. "Natalie, whatever this is, it can wait." Kayla folded one arm and gave me a look that was meant to read as victory. She glanced down at her phone screen, then at mine, putting pieces together in the wrong order. She still thought I was bluffing. Or maybe she thought she understood the arrangement better than I did. That happens sometimes. People get very confident when they've only been given one side of a story. I said, "An intern at your hospital just poured coffee on me in the front lobby and informed me that she is your wife." Nothing moved for one full second. Even the sounds in the room seemed to pull back. Then Daniel said, in a voice I had heard only a few times in all our years together, what? I did not repeat myself. I had learned long ago that silence can do more work than explanation. So I let the room sit inside what I had said. Kayla's face lost color first at the mouth. Daniel tried again, this time faster. "Natalie, listen to me. I have no idea what you're talking about. You'll understand when you get here. I said I'm in a meeting. And I said come downstairs." I kept my voice level. There was no point raising it. The facts were already enough. Across from me, Kayla was no longer smiling. Her grip on her phone had changed. Less performative now. More defensive. She looked from me to the speaker on the counter, then over at Evan as if trying to calculate what he knew, what I knew, and whether either of us could really do anything with it. Daniel lowered his voice. "Take this off speaker." "No, Natalie." 5 minutes, I said. "If you're not here in 5 minutes, I'll ask legal to come down instead." He did not answer immediately. Then the line went dead. I picked up the phone, ended the call cleanly, and slipped it back into my bag. No one said anything for a moment. The lobby had resumed its sounds by then, but more quietly than before. The automatic doors opened and closed. The printer near admitting started again. Somewhere overhead, an announcement came through about a physician callback. Yet the center of the room still held. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a slim leather card case. From inside it, I took one of my own cards and handed it to the valet. "Please have environmental services come for the floor," I said. "And after that, take 10 minutes." He looked at the card, then at me, then back at the card again. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. He did not say my name, but now he no longer needed to. Kayla saw the change in his face before she understood the reason for it. You could watch the thought travel through her. Something had shifted, and she had not moved it. She took one step toward me. "Who are you?" she asked. I turned to the front desk and asked for a towel. One of the reception staff stood up too quickly, nearly knocking her chair back, then went to a cabinet under the desk and came back with a folded white cloth. I thanked her, pressed it once to my sleeve, and set it down. Only then did I answer. "My name is Natalie Rowan." Kayla stared. It is strange how quickly people rearrange their posture when a name reaches them before the rest of the truth. She did not fully understand yet, but she understood enough to feel unsafe. Still, pride is a stubborn thing. She said, "Okay." "And?" I met her eyes. "And you should stop talking until someone from HR arrives." She laughed once, but it came out thin. "HR," she said. "You think I'm scared of HR?" "No," I said. "I think you don't understand process." That landed harder than the card had. The reason most people fear authority is because they imagine anger, raised voices, threats, public humiliation. What they should fear when they have crossed a real line is procedure. It does not get tired. It does not improvise. It does not lose interest halfway through. It simply keeps going until every document is in the right folder and every signature is in place. I turned to the receptionist. Please call Human Resources, Security, and Ms. Green from administration. Tell them I'm in the main lobby and I'd like them here now. The receptionist nodded at once. Kayla's phone lowered another inch. You can't do that, she said. I just did. That's insane. Over coffee? No, I said. Over conduct. Evan remained beside me, quiet and steady. He had not added a word since Daniel hung up, but he did not leave either. I appreciated that. The lobby no longer needed defending. It needed witness. Some people understand the difference. Kayla looked at him. You knew. He answered with the same calm he had used with the patient on the floor. I knew enough to tell you to put the phone away. She swallowed. For a moment, I thought she might finally do it. Instead, she hit the side button and locked the screen, then kept holding the device as if that alone preserved some dignity. A volunteer came by with a yellow caution sign and set it beside the coffee on the floor. 2 environmental staff followed with gloves, paper towels, and a wheeled bucket. They moved quietly, professionally, eyes lowered. One of them glanced at my sleeve and then away again. Routine has a way of restoring proportion. I watched them for a few seconds and felt my own thinking settle further. The initial sting of betrayal was still there, but farther back now. Useful emotion had already done its job. It had gotten my attention. After that, all emotion would do was make the edges less precise. So I began to sort what I had in front of me. I had the intern's badge. I had witnesses in the lobby. I had the statement she made about Daniel. I had the call itself. I had the time. And I had a husband upstairs who had just heard enough to know he no longer controlled the timing. That mattered. Kayla tried one more angle. He told me, she said, the words coming more carefully now, that his marriage was basically over. I did not respond. He said they only stayed together for the business side of things. Still, I said nothing. It wasn't restraint for appearance. It was simpler than that. There are statements that deserve an answer, and there are statements that belong in a file. This one belonged in a file. She mistook my silence for uncertainty. We're serious, she added. He was going to make an announcement. I looked at the reception desk clock. 9:19 a.m., he has 4 minutes, I said. That was when Monica Green arrived from administration, still carrying her tablet and access badge lanyard in one hand, as if she had come straight out of another meeting. Monica had worked with my family for 11 years. She was efficient, discreet, and unusually good at hearing what was not being said in a room. She took in the coffee on my suit, Evan at my side, Kayla near the door, environmental services finishing the floor, and the faces gathered at a careful distance around the perimeter. Then she looked at me. Ms. Rowan, she said. Not Natalie. Not with an audience. That was enough. Kayla turned toward her so sharply I could hear the heel of her shoe scrape the marble. Monica's face did not change, but I saw recognition settle into place behind her eyes. She understood at once that this was no longer a personnel issue on its own. It was governance. Please take notes, I told her. Time, location, all persons present. We'll need witness names from reception, valet, environmental, and anyone else who directly observed the interaction. Monica opened her tablet. Yes, ma'am. Kayla stared at her. No. Hold on. This is crazy. Monica did not even look up. I continued. The intern identified herself as Kayla Mendez. She stated that she was married to Daniel Rowan. She was out of dress code, recording in the lobby during work hours, and verbally harassed staff. She then deliberately poured coffee on me. Kayla shook her head hard enough to move her hair loose around her face. That is not what happened. I turned to Monica. At attempted misrepresentation of authority. Monica nodded and typed. No, Kayla said again, louder now. No, because you can't just write things down and make them true. I looked at her and said, that's correct. Which is why we have witnesses. At that, she finally looked afraid. Not embarrassed. not offended. Afraid. A lot of people are comfortable inside stories. They can improvise inside feelings, flirtation, secrecy, and excuses. But the moment something becomes chronological, documented, and witnessed, they lose balance. Facts narrow the room. Security arrived next. 2 officers in Navy uniforms, both men I recognized. They slowed as they approached, reading the atmosphere before stepping in. One of them, Marcus Hale, had been at Harbor Ridge nearly as long as the valet. "Ms. Rowan," he said quietly. "Thank you for coming." He nodded once and waited. That is what competent people do when they enter a tense space. They do not fill it with themselves. I said, "No one is being removed right now. Please remain nearby until the CEO comes downstairs." Kayla turned to Marcus with obvious desperation. "You know me. Tell them this is ridiculous." Marcus kept his eyes on me, not her. "I'm here to follow instructions," he said. She laughed again, but now it sounded brittle. "Right. Of course." Then she looked toward the executive elevators. I followed her gaze. The brushed steel doors at the far end of the lobby were still closed, reflecting the overhead lights in pale vertical lines. In a few minutes, Daniel would step out of them. However composed he tried to appear, he would already know this had moved beyond private cleanup. The room itself had become a record. I smoothed the front of my ruined jacket once and straightened the cuff at my wrist. Then I waited. The elevator doors stayed closed for another 30 seconds. In a hospital lobby, 30 seconds can feel like nothing or a long time, depending on what you're waiting for. I stood near the front desk with the towel folded beside my bag and let the room settle into a new pattern. Reception had resumed in a careful, muted way. Environmental services had finished the floor and rolled the caution sign aside. Security remained near the doorway without crowding anyone. Monica stood to my right with her tablet ready, saying very little, which was exactly right. Kayla had stopped trying to look confident. She was still upright, still holding her phone, still trying to arrange her face into something composed, but the edges were gone. Every few seconds, she glanced toward the elevators, then toward me, then toward the entrance, as if calculating distance. People do that when they realize the scene they were managing has turned into a process they cannot control. I have seen that moment before. Not with affairs. Not with coffee in a hospital lobby, but with vendors who thought inflated invoices would slide by unnoticed. With administrators who changed numbers after board review and assumed no one would trace the sequence back. With donors who believed access meant exemption. The details differ. The structure rarely does. Emotion tells you something is wrong. Order tells you what to do next. I reached into my bag and took out my small notebook, the one I use when I travel. It had the flight tag still tucked into the back cover. I opened to a blank page and wrote the time at the top, 9:21 a.m. Then I wrote 3 short lines underneath. Lobby, Kayla Mendez, Daniel to arrive. I did not do this for show. I did it because when a moment matters, I like to mark where it actually began. Memory is useful. Contemporaneous notes are better. Kayla watched me write. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making a record." "That's insane." "No," I said. "It's standard." The word seemed to bother her more than anything else had. Standard. Not personal. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just the ordinary machinery that starts moving when people choose badly in front of the wrong witness. She shifted her weight and said, "You're treating me like a criminal." I closed the notebook and looked at her. "I'm treating you like an employee involved in a documented incident." That quieted her for a moment. Then she tried another path. "You don't understand what he told me." I let that pass. "I'm serious," she said. "He said you two weren't really together. He said everything was basically an arrangement." I turned to Monica. "Please note that Ms. Mendez states she had an ongoing personal relationship with the CEO and believed his marriage was functionally over." Monica typed without comment. Kayla's mouth fell open. "That's not what I raised one hand, not to silence her in a theatrical way, simply to slow the room. "This is the point," I said. "You may want to be careful now. There is a difference between explaining yourself and creating additional statements that will need to be reviewed later." She stared at me. I could see the exact second she realized I was not trying to win an argument. I was sorting facts by category: the relationship claim, the work conduct, the misuse of implied authority, the incident itself, the likely policy violations, each one separate, each one with a place to go. That is what people often miss about power. They expect it to feel loud. In reality, the most durable form of it usually looks like organization. Evan leaned slightly toward me and said, in a low voice, "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes," I said. He nodded once. No speech. No reassurance. Just presence. I appreciated that more than he probably knew. The front doors opened, and a burst of humid summer air moved through the lobby. Two visitors came in speaking softly to one another. One of them slowed when she noticed the security officers and the unusual stillness near reception, then kept walking. The ordinary world was continuing around us, which I found strangely steadying. Monica finished one note and looked up. "Do you want communications alerted?" "Yes," I said. "But not yet." "Understood." "Also legal," I said. "Ask them to prepare to preserve access logs, badge records, lobby camera footage, and all executive floor entry history for the last 90 days. No deletions. No edits." Monica's fingers moved across the tablet. "Yes, ma'am." Kayla made a small sound in her throat. "You can't just pull my badge history." I looked at her. "If there is a formal workplace investigation, yes, we can." Her hand tightened around the phone again. I could almost hear her moving backward through recent weeks in her mind. Office visits, parking garage entries, late arrivals, maybe lunch receipts, texts sent from corners she assumed were private. That is the trouble with living casually inside systems. Most systems remember more than people think they do. She said, quieter now, he gave me permission. I answered just as quietly. That will be part of the review. The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped out alone. Even at a distance, I could tell he had come down fast. His tie was off-center by half an inch. The jacket button wrong at first, then fixed midway across the lobby with a quick hand movement he likely thought no one noticed. He was a good public reader of rooms, and he understood immediately that this room had already read him first. He slowed when he saw Kayla. Then he saw the coffee on my suit. Then Monica, security, Evan, and the gathering line of witnesses near the front desk. His face shifted through 3 expressions in under a second: confusion for the audience, irritation for me, and fear underneath both. He stopped about 6 feet away. "Natalie," he said. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes the first few seconds matter more than anything that follows. If you move too quickly, the other person can still believe they are steering. So I let him stand there long enough to feel that he had entered my timeline, not the other way around. Then I said, "Thank you for coming down." He looked at Kayla. Not long. Just long enough. That was enough too. He turned back to me. "I don't know what's going on here." Evan looked away at that, not out of discomfort. Out of restraint. Daniel took one step closer. "I was in the middle of a financing meeting." "I know. You had no right to interrupt that over some misunderstanding in the lobby." "It's not a misunderstanding." Kayla's head turned toward him sharply. She was waiting for him to restore her version of reality. To smile, perhaps. To take control. To say she was exaggerating but protected. To put the room back where she needed it. He did not look at her again. Instead, he said to me, "Can we do this upstairs?" No, the words sat there calmly. He lowered his voice. "Natalie." "No," I said again. "We'll do it here." His jaw tightened. Not because he wanted privacy for me. Because he wanted privacy for himself. I opened my notebook again and wrote one line. Daniel arrived 9:24 a.m. Then I closed it. He noticed that. "What is this?" he asked. "A record." He drew in a breath through his nose. "You're making a spectacle." "No," I said. "The spectacle already happened. This is the response." That landed with several people at once. I could feel it. Kayla took 2 quick steps forward. "Daniel, tell them. Tell them what you told me." He did not answer her. "Tell them," she said again, louder. "Tell them I'm not lying." He turned toward her then, but not with warmth. It was a look I had seen him give underperforming consultants and junior executives he had decided were now inconvenient. A flattening look. A distancing look. I think he said carefully, "You've misunderstood some things." She actually recoiled. "No," she said. "No, don't do that." Monica's fingers stopped over the tablet for half a second, then continued. I said, "Good. Let's keep this simple." Daniel looked back at me, and I could see him trying to calculate angles. If he denied too much, she might speak more. If he admitted anything, the room became impossible. If he turned it into a personal marital dispute, maybe he could still reduce the institutional damage. He tried the third option. "This is not the place for a private conversation," he said. I answered, "Then you should have kept your private conduct out of the hospital." The sentence was not sharp, just clean. He looked at Monica. "I'm asking everyone to clear this area." Monica did not move. "Miss Green," he said, more firmly, "that's a direct instruction." Monica looked at me first. There are moments when hierarchy clarifies itself without needing explanation. This was one of them. I said, "No." Daniel's face changed again. Only slightly, but it was there. The first real crack. Because in front of staff, security, and administration, he had given an order and watched it fail. I turned to Monica. "Please note that at 9:25 a.m., the CEO attempted to direct administration to suspend witness presence during an active documented incident." Monica typed. Daniel took a step toward the desk. "This is absurd." "Maybe," I said, "but it's still being documented." He looked at Kayla as though seeing her for the first time in a different category entirely. She saw it too. "You told me," she said, voice shaking now, "that once the summer board cycle was over, things would change." No one moved. Daniel said, "I think you need to stop speaking." There it was. Not denial. Not exactly. Just control. And it was the wrong choice. I turned to Monica again. "Please add that Ms. Mendez states there was a promise change tied to the board calendar." Daniel looked at me with open disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "This is your answer?" "Taking notes?" "No," I said. "My answer is sequence." He frowned. So I gave it to him plainly. Here's what happens next. Step 1, we preserve every relevant record. Step 2, HR and legal conduct separate interviews. Step 3, access is reviewed, authority is limited, and external counsel is notified if financial exposure appears. After that, the board is informed. Kayla looked between us like someone watching a language she suddenly understood just enough to fear. Daniel said, "You're overreacting." I shook my head once. "No, I'm being thorough." The room was very quiet. Then the HR director, Leslie Park, came through the side corridor carrying a folder and a badge reader tablet. She slowed when she saw Daniel there, then looked at me. "Ms. Rowan." "Thank you for coming." I gestured lightly toward Kayla first, then toward Daniel. "Ms. Park, I need immediate administrative leave paperwork prepared for one employee and temporary executive access restriction measures initiated for one officer pending board review." Leslie held very still. For a second, the only sound in the lobby was the low hum of the air system and a distant elevator bell. Daniel said, carefully, "Natalie, don't do this in public." I looked at him and said, "I'm not doing this in public. I'm doing it in the place where it began." Then I put the phone face down on the counter again and waited for Leslie to open the folder. Leslie set the folder on the counter and opened it with the kind of calm care people use when they know everyone in the room is watching. She had been with us for 8 years. Before hospital administration, she had worked in labor compliance for a regional health system, and it showed. Leslie never moved quickly just to look decisive. She moved in order. That mattered in moments like this. Daniel knew it too. "Leslie," he said, trying for authority again, "this is unnecessary." She did not answer him. She looked at me. I said, "Please begin with Ms. Mendez." Leslie nodded and turned one page in the folder. "Kayla, I'm placing you on immediate administrative leave pending investigation into workplace conduct, misuse of authority, recording in a restricted environment, and a reported physical incident involving another individual on hospital property." Kayla blinked hard. "No," she said. "No, you can't." Leslie kept her tone neutral. "You will surrender your badge, your parking tag, and any temporary access credentials now. You are not authorized to enter any staff-only area effective immediately." Kayla looked at Daniel with open panic. Say something. He did not. That told me more than anything else could have. The truth in a room like that does not come from dramatic confession. It comes from what people refuse to interrupt. Daniel had every chance to laugh this off, deny familiarity, call for a procedural pause, or at least ask what evidence existed before action was taken. Instead, he stood there measuring loss. Kayla took one step toward him. Daniel. He looked at her with a face I had seen before in other contexts. It was the face he used when he had decided a person was now a liability he could no longer afford. I think, he said slowly, you should cooperate. The sentence landed like a small collapse. She stared at him. Then she laughed once softly, but there was no humor in it. Just disbelief. Cooperate. Leslie held out her hand. Your badge, please. For a moment, I thought Kayla might throw it. Instead, she pulled the lanyard over her head with shaking fingers and dropped it into Leslie's hand. The plastic badge made a small, ordinary sound on the folder. That sound stayed with me. People expect big endings. Most endings are administrative. Leslie set the badge aside and asked, do you have your office keys or departmental access card? Kayla shook her head too fast. No, Monica looked up from her tablet. Her batch history and issue log will confirm. Leslie nodded. Good. Then I turned to Daniel. He saw it coming and straightened, as if posture alone could reassemble the ground under him. Natalie, he said, whatever you think this looks like, it is not something to handle in a lobby. Then give me a better place and a better explanation, I said. He opened his mouth, then stopped. I waited. This is the part people often mishandle. They fill the silence because they want relief from it. But silence is useful when the other person is searching for a version of events that can still survive the next 10 minutes. If you let them speak too early, they lie in broad strokes. If you let them sit one beat longer, they start to reveal the limits of what they can defend. So I waited. He finally said, I made a mistake. I nodded once. What kind? His face tightened. He had hoped the phrase alone might buy softness. General remorse. Human error. Something foggy enough to stand in for detail. I did not give him that. He said, a personal one. No, I said. Try again. A few feet away, the receptionist lowered her eyes. Evan remained beside the desk, hands loosely folded, saying nothing. Security stayed exactly where they were, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to invite movement. The whole room had settled into a respectful stillness. No one wanted spectacle now. They wanted definition. Daniel looked at me carefully. I had poor judgment, he said. Personal or institutional? He hesitated. That was answer enough. I said, you allowed a personal relationship to cross into hospital space. He did not deny it. You permitted badge-level access beyond role. He said nothing. You allowed public-facing staff behavior that violated dress code, conduct policy, and chain-of-command standards. Still nothing. And this morning, I said, you left me to hear about your judgment from an intern in the lobby. Kayla made a small sound at that, something broken and angry at once, but I did not look at her. Daniel said, this is not as simple as you're making it. I answered, it's simpler than you hoped. Then I turned to Leslie. Please prepare executive restriction protocol. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Absolutely not. Leslie did not move yet. She looked at me for confirmation. I gave it. Effective immediately, his physical access to finance, procurement, executive approvals, and credentialing systems is suspended pending emergency board review. Daniel stepped forward. Marcus Hale shifted one pace in response. Not aggressive, just present. This is insane, Daniel said. You cannot suspend a sitting CEO in the middle of a business day because of gossip and a personal accusation. I looked at him and kept my voice low. I'm not doing it because of gossip. I'm doing it because an intern used your name as operational authority in the front lobby at 9:12 in the morning, in front of staff, security, and witnesses. And because you arrived downstairs less concerned with whether it happened than with where it was being discussed. That quieted him for half a second. Then he tried a different approach. He softened his face and lowered his voice, aiming it only at me now. Natalie, please. Let's go to your office. Let's talk privately. No, his expression changed again. You're tired. You just got off a flight. Yes, this is exactly why this should wait. I shook my head. No, this is exactly why it won't. There are times when postponement is wisdom. This was not one of them. Delay helps the person with more to hide. It gives them time to call, delete, align, explain, and blur. I had spent too many years cleaning up after polished men who relied on that window. Not this time. I opened my notebook again and wrote one line. 9:29 a.m., Daniel acknowledges mistake and poor judgment. Then I closed it. He saw me do it and looked almost offended by the act itself, as though precision were somehow unfair. Kayla, meanwhile, had moved from fear into a thinner, sharper kind of anger. The kind that comes when humiliation finally breaks through denial. He told me you were finished, she said to me. I turned toward her then, not abruptly. Just enough. Did he? She nodded, jaw set. He said you lived separate lives. He said you only stayed married for appearances and the board. Daniel said, stop. But she was past stopping. He said once the refinancing closed, he'd make everything official. The words hung in the air. Leslie did not look up from her folder, but I could see her listening carefully. I asked Kayla, did he ever promise you a position? She blinked, not expecting the question. What? A title. A role. A move. Anything formal. She looked from me to Daniel and back. He said he was going to place me in executive outreach after my internship. Monica began typing again before I even turned. I said, and did that role exist? Kayla's face changed. She did not know. Of course she didn't. That is another pattern I have seen many times. People who abuse institutions promise futures inside structures they have not actually built. A role. A transfer. A project. A budget. Something just specific enough to feel real and just vague enough to avoid review. Daniel said, this is absurd. She's upset. She's saying whatever comes to mind. I looked at him. Then I'm sure the records will help us. That was the first moment he looked truly cornered. Not because of the affair. He had probably rehearsed denial of that in one form or another long before today. But because he knew which records I meant. Badge activity. Executive suite entries. Procurement timestamps. Approval chains. Parking tags. Calendar overlays. Text retention on managed devices. It is amazing how many people believe misconduct lives in secret when it actually lives in systems. I said to Monica, add IT preservation for executive mobile device records and administrative assistant scheduling logs. 90 days. Daniel said, no, I turned to him. Do you want me to make it 180? He stared at me. Then he said quietly, you're doing this because you're hurt. It was an interesting choice. Not denial. Not defense. Reduction. I answered, I'm doing this because I'm responsible. That seemed to land farther into the room than either of us intended. Responsibility. Not revenge. Not marriage. Not embarrassment. That was the center of it, and everyone present knew it. I could see relief in Leslie's face. In Monica's too. Even in Marcus, who kept his hands folded in front of him and watched the floor just enough to stay respectful. When people have been working under disorder for some time, they recognize the difference when someone finally names the right category. Daniel tried once more. All right, he said. Then let's be responsible. Give me the chance to review whatever you think you have before you destroy an entire organization over a misunderstanding. I asked, do you hear yourself? His brow tightened. I'm trying to protect the hospital. No, I said. You're trying to control the timing. That was when Evan finally spoke. Only one sentence. She's right. Daniel turned toward him so sharply it felt almost physical. You should stay out of this. Evan's expression did not move. I was already in it. I was standing here. That ended that. I took a slow breath and shifted my weight slightly. The coffee on my jacket had dried at the edges, leaving the fabric stiff. My shoulders ached from the flight. I wanted clean clothes, water, and 10 quiet minutes in my office. Instead, I had this. Still, there was clarity in it now. Enough clarity to act. I said to Leslie, prepare the executive notice. She opened a second section of the folder and removed a printed form. Temporary restriction pending emergency board action, she read quietly. Requires witness signatures from administration and security. Good, I said. Daniel stared at the paper as if it had materialized unfairly out of thin air. Natalie, he said, and for the first time there was something close to pleading in his voice. Think. I am. He lowered his voice even further. Please. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, the board meets at 11. He went still. I continued. Until then, you will not return to the executive floor alone. You will not access procurement, finance, or HR systems. You will not instruct anyone to alter logs, calendars, footage, or correspondence. And you will not contact Ms. Mendez from this moment forward. Kayla looked up fast at that last part. Leslie wrote while I spoke. Daniel said, you can't issue unilateral conditions before a vote. I can preserve governance before a vote. His mouth tightened, but he knew I was right. I picked up my phone, opened one contact, and sent a short message to outside counsel. Emergency board package. Harbor Ridge. 11 a.m. include conduct, access, and procurement review. Then I locked the screen and placed the phone back on the desk. Monica's tablet chimed softly with an incoming reply of her own. She glanced down and said, IT confirms preservation hold has been initiated. That was the moment the room changed for the second time. Not emotionally, legally. Daniel knew it. So did I. And because he knew it, he stopped arguing and started thinking about what else might already be visible. That was when I realized this was no longer only about the affair. There was something else behind his eyes now. Not shame, calculation. I looked at him carefully and asked, what, exactly, are you worried we'll find first? He did not answer. But he looked, just once, toward Monica's tablet when she mentioned procurement. And that was enough for me to understand where the next conversation would begin. Then I waited. When Daniel looked at Monica's tablet, it was only for a second. Most people in that lobby would not have noticed it. They were watching faces, not patterns. But I had spent too many years in boardrooms not to recognize a reflex like that. People look toward what can hurt them, not who. What? I turned to Monica and said, open procurement approvals from the last 60 days. Daniel answered before she could. No. I looked at him. You don't give that instruction anymore. The sentence was simple. It did not need emphasis. Monica unlocked the tablet and moved a few screens over. Harbor Ridge used a mirrored executive dashboard for purchase approvals, budget releases, vendor routing, and final signatures. It was not glamorous, but it was reliable. If someone signed for a six-figure purchase at 11:43 p.m. from an executive account, the system remembered. If a vendor changed its bank details 3 times in 1 week, the system remembered that too. Monica handed the tablet to me. I did not hold it up dramatically. I just read. There were 6 high-value approvals in the last month that mattered immediately. Imaging equipment, cardiac monitoring, surgical towers, a refrigeration replacement for pharmacy storage. All of them timed during my overseas trip. That part was expected. I had already delegated interim review authority on paper before leaving. What caught my eye was not the approvals themselves. It was the vendor routing. 2 payments had been split across newly created entities that did not match the parent supplier names. One had a consulting suffix. Another had a logistics clearing designation that looked legitimate until you noticed the address line was incomplete. Both had been fast-tracked under urgent capital need. Both were tied to Daniel's authorization path. I scrolled once more, then once again, and there it was. A transfer sequence connected to a temporary holding vendor for expansion-related procurement, an amount large enough to matter. Not large enough to hide in chaos forever, but large enough to do damage before anyone asked the right question. I handed the tablet back to Monica. Please flag these entries and send the full audit trail to legal and external counsel. Daniel spoke quickly. Those are bridge transactions. For what? He did not answer directly. We had timing issues on release approvals. With whose approval? He was quiet. I asked mine. He said nothing. Board finance. Nothing again. Controller. Still nothing. Monica's fingers moved. I turned to Leslie. Please note that in response to procurement review, Mr. Rowan identified irregular entries as bridge transactions, but did not identify authorized approval source. Leslie wrote it down. Daniel gave a short exhale, the kind people do when they realize the shape of the room has fully turned against improvisation. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You're building conclusions in real time. No, I said. I'm identifying unanswered questions in real time. The conclusions come later. He looked tired all at once, not remorseful. Tired in the way people get when they understand that the version of themselves they maintained in public will now have to survive documentation. It rarely does. Kayla, who had been standing almost motionless for the last minute, looked between us and said, very quietly, "What is procurement?" No one answered right away. Then I said, "Money connected to patient care." Her face changed. The lobby remained very still. It is one thing to realize you were part of an affair. It is another to realize you may have been standing next to something larger and dirtier than vanity. I asked Monica, any linked access entries between executive floor and Ms. Mendez's badge? Monica checked. Yes. How many? She looked at the screen more closely. 31 after-hours entries over 8 weeks. Mostly executive corridor and private conference suite. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. I said, send that too. Kayla whispered, you told me that was allowed. He did not look at her. That was when Evan stepped away from the desk for the first time since Daniel arrived. He crossed to the side counter near reception, picked up a paper cup of water someone had left there for staff, and brought it back to me. Drink, he said quietly. I took it and did. The water was cool and plain. It steadied me more than I expected. My throat still tasted faintly of stale airplane air and coffee. I set the cup down and looked at Daniel again. Here is where we are, I said. There are now 2 separate tracks. One is conduct. The other is finance. They will not be handled together, and they will not be handled informally. He rubbed one hand across his face. Natalie, I shook my head once. No. Listen. He stopped. Track 1. HR investigates policy, access, and misuse of authority. Track 2. Legal and external audit review procurement entries, payment routing, and approval sequence. You will not shape either process. He looked at me and asked, is this what you want? It was an odd question. Not because he asked it, but because he still thought wanting had something to do with it. I said, this stopped being about want when your name started opening doors it had no business opening. The words were quiet, but they carried. A woman near reception, a visitor who had been waiting with a clipboard against her chest, lowered her eyes. Marcus Hale shifted his stance again, still patient, still professional. Leslie turned another page in the folder. Monica sent the flagged items onward. Procedure was now moving independently of anyone's mood. That is when Arthur Bell arrived from legal. He came in through the side corridor with a hard case tucked under one arm and his reading glasses still in his hand. Arthur had served as outside governance counsel for my family long before he ever became lead advisor to the hospital system. He was not dramatic by nature, which is one reason I trusted him. He took in the room once. Me, the coffee-stained suit, Daniel near the desk, Kayla without her badge, Monica with the tablet, Leslie with the forms. Then he said, I came as quickly as I could. Thank you, I said. He set the hard case on the counter, opened it, and took out 2 documents. One was the emergency board notice template. The other was an interim preservation directive for financial records, access logs, and relevant device retention. He placed them flat on the counter. I've prepared the hold order, he said. Once issued, no records tied to executive approvals, procurement routing, HR access exceptions, or managed communications can be altered without notice to counsel. Daniel stared at the papers. Arthur continued, I've also contacted external forensic accounting. They can begin remote review within the hour. That was the end of Daniel's balance. He sat down in one of the lobby chairs without being asked to. Not heavily. Not theatrically. Just as if his knees had recognized before the rest of him that standing had become less useful. Kayla looked at him with a kind of shocked emptiness. So it's true, she asked. He did not answer. About the money? Still nothing. Her voice grew thinner. Daniel, He looked up at her finally, and what I saw on his face was not love, not anger, not even fear exactly. It was self-protection. That is a very cold expression when you see it clearly. Arthur slid the preservation directive toward me. This can be issued immediately. I read the first page, then signed. The pen moved cleanly across the line. That signature did not end my marriage, not yet. It did something more practical. It told the institution that the era of private handling was over. I handed the signed pages back to Arthur. Release it. He nodded and passed copies to Monica and Leslie. Daniel looked up at me from the chair. You could still keep this contained. I answered, it is contained. Inside the proper process. No press. No police. No board spectacle. You could do that. I looked at him for a long moment. There are requests people make because they are sorry, and there are requests people make because they are cornered. This was the second kind. I said, if finance review confirms unauthorized diversion of funds, it will be referred. If conduct review confirms misuse of position, it will be referred. I won't negotiate either result. Arthur added, very calmly, that is correct. Leslie turned to Kayla. You will need to wait in conference room B for your intake statement. Kayla's eyes filled suddenly, as if tears had only just found the right opening. I didn't know about any money. I believed that part, or most of it. But belief was not the point. I said, then your best chance is to tell the truth early and completely. She looked at me as if she wanted softness and knew she had not earned it. I thought he was going to marry me, she said. I answered, that was never something this institution could give you. She lowered her head. Marcus stepped closer, not to restrain her, only to indicate the direction she would need to walk. She followed Leslie without protest. The absence of protest mattered more than tears. When she was gone, the lobby seemed to widen. I turned back to Daniel. He was still seated, elbows on his knees now, hands clasped, staring at the floor. For the first time that morning, he looked like an ordinary man and not a title. That is not always justice, but it is often the beginning of it. Arthur spoke first. Daniel, pending the 11 a.m. emergency board session, you are relieved of operational access and may not contact finance, procurement, HR, IT, or any reporting employee regarding today's events or related records. Daniel gave a tired nod. Arthur continued, you are also instructed not to contact Miss Mendez. He nodded again. I asked, do you understand? Yes, he said. It was the first clear answer he had given all morning. Monica looked up from the tablet. Initial audit packet has been sent. Forensic team confirms receipt. Arthur closed the hard case. I looked around the lobby then. The caution sign was gone. The floor was clean again. The front desk had resumed its regular rhythm. A volunteer was speaking gently to a family by the elevators. Somewhere down the corridor, I could hear the muted squeak of transport wheels. The building had absorbed the event the way good institutions try to absorb damage, not by pretending it never happened, but by returning to function while the necessary work continues behind the walls. I picked up my bag. Then I said, at 11 a.m., the board will decide interim leadership. Daniel looked up slowly. He understood what that meant. He also understood I had not said, review your position. I had said interim leadership. That distinction mattered. Evan, standing beside the desk, said nothing, but I felt his attention shift slightly. He understood too. Arthur asked, would you like me to prepare both scenarios? No, I said. Prepare one. He nodded. That was all. I looked at Daniel once more and said, you should use the next 90 minutes wisely. Write down dates, names, every approval path, every exception, every account you touched. Don't try to become innocent. Just become accurate. He closed his eyes again and gave the smallest nod. Then I turned away. Evan picked up my suitcase from where it had been left near the column when I first came in. He brought it over without comment and set the handle upright for me. Thank you, I said. Of course. I took hold of the suitcase, adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, and looked toward the elevator bank. The boardroom was upstairs. The next part would happen there, with minutes, votes, documents, and a closed door. And for the first time that morning, that felt exactly right. By the time the board meeting ended, it was mid-afternoon. I won't walk through every vote. Those rooms have their own rhythm, and most of it is paperwork, policy language, and careful silence. What matters is this: Daniel was removed by formal vote. External forensic review was authorized. Interim reporting lines were reassigned before anyone left the table. Evan was appointed acting chief executive while the full review moved forward, and the decision was unanimous. No one clapped. That would have been the wrong tone for the day. People signed what needed to be signed. Copies were distributed. Questions were answered in the order they belonged. Arthur coordinated the next legal steps. Leslie began the internal process with HR. Monica moved straight into transition planning. By 4 o'clock, the institution had a structure again. That was the part one cared about most. Not the embarrassment. Not the betrayal. Structure. After the meeting, I finally went to my office and changed out of the stained suit. One of the administrative assistants had brought up a clean blouse and a navy jacket from the spare wardrobe closet we keep for emergencies. I washed the dried coffee from my hands in the small private bathroom and stood there a minute with cold water running over my wrists. The room was quiet. No performance. No one asking anything from me. Just the sound of water and the low hum of the vent above the mirror. I looked tired. More tired than I had let myself feel in the lobby. Then I dried my hands, buttoned the clean jacket, and went back out. There was still work to do. The next few weeks were not dramatic the way people imagine these things. They were disciplined. Interviews, preserved records, audit review, council calls, board memos, insurance notifications, vendor outreach, one correction after another. That is how institutions heal when they are serious about healing. Not with speeches, with sequence. Daniel resigned any remaining claims before the full finance review concluded. After that, the legal track became its own matter. Kayla's internship was terminated, and her statement became part of the HR record. I heard later that she retained counsel, which was probably wise. I did not follow her life after that. Boundaries matter, even when someone has crossed yours. As for me, I went home that night later than I meant to. The house was still. The kitchen lights were on over the island, left that way by habit. I set my bag down, took off my watch, and stood for a moment with both hands resting on the cool stone counter. Then I filled the kettle. That may sound small, but I remember it clearly. The click of the switch. The soft rush of water beginning to heat. The neatness of tea bags in a wooden box. A folded dish towel by the sink. After a day when too many things had moved at once, I needed ordinary objects. A mug. Steam. A clean counter. Something that asked nothing from me except attention. I made chamomile tea and did not sit down right away. I wiped the counter even though it was already clean. I sorted the mail into 2 stacks. Personal. Legal. Then I put Daniel's house key in a small envelope and wrote his name on the front for Arthur to collect in the morning. After that, I sat at the table with the tea in both hands and let the quiet settle. People talk about closure as if it arrives like weather. It doesn't. Most of the time, closure is routine. It is changing clothes. It is returning a key. It is making a list for tomorrow. It is deciding where your attention belongs now. The next morning, I was back at the hospital before 8. Evan was already there. He was in the executive conference room with his jacket off, reading through transition notes and staffing summaries with the same steady focus I had seen in the lobby when he was kneeling beside that patient. He looked up when I came in and asked only one question. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," I said. He nodded as if that was enough for now and handed me a revised operations outline with 3 items marked for my review. Not comfort. Not drama. Work. Appropriate work. I appreciated him for that more than I said. Over the next month, that became our rhythm. Short meetings. Clear decisions. No extra words. The hospital got quieter in good ways.